All right. Well, good to see everybody, and to our first Tuesday Truth Seekers. And I was debating on what to talk about, and so y'all may not be feeling this at all, but it's just kind of me. I'm paying attention. I kind of try to pay attention to everything that's going on around us as much as you can, and that's been overwhelming for a while, right? And so it's important to be able to compartmentalize that. But one thing that's going on now is we're entering into primary season, right? We had the first debate, and so right now you have within the Republican Party, people beating up on each other and trying to get the nomination and things like that. And it gets very disheartening. I'm really disheartened in how the Republicans are kind of fighting against each other, like using the same tactics that we say don't do, like don't take things completely out of context to try to discredit your political enemy. I understand there's going to be attacks, but at least try to be above board. And why are you using like really left-leaning liberal talking points to attack certain guys? It's just all of it. You're just like, oh. And I think there's some decent candidates that are there, but then there's those times too. I'm like, really, 330 million people. This is it, right? This is it. And so I kind of started having flashbacks to 2020, whenever you're having to vote. Well, really, 2016 and 2020 both. Both candidates, really across the board, were not popular, right? Clinton and Trump in 2016, neither candidate really was all that popular, even within their own bases, compared to other races. And then, of course, you had Biden and Trump, and it was the same things like, this is it, right? And because I also say it's very important for us to vote, and we need to be involved in that. I just wish there were better people to vote for. And even I started kind of feeling, it's like, what does it matter, right? Like there's that temptation to feel that. And then you combine the fact that we're coming at this from a biblical perspective, right? And so, I'm talking to a lot of Christians. As Christians, and I'm certainly getting the sense of this, there's a lot of Christians who are frustrated with it because you look at not only the ideology that many times goes directly against biblical principles, but then the character of some of the people that you have to vote for. Even if you support their ideology, their character goes completely against biblical principles, and it can easily get overwhelming. You say, you know what, enough. And so one, I want to say that that's not an abnormal feeling. In fact, you will probably feel that. And that's okay. However, just because you feel that, does that mean that the best thing to do is just to throw your hands up and say, you know what, I'm not even going to pay attention to all this stuff that adds a little bit of stress in my life and concern, and I'm just going to focus on my family and me and my job, and that's it. I don't think that's what we should do. We need to be engaged, right? Now, we need to have our boundaries. And so today I want to just talk a little bit about why we need to be engaged as Christians. And, you look at Romans 13, and some people have used Romans 13 as a reason not to get involved. However, I think it's precisely the opposite. It's talking about how governments are under God's authority, right? And especially whenever you think about the way that our government is founded with those three words, we the people, right? So that means our government wants us to be involved. So therefore, as Christians, given that opportunity, we should be celebrating the fact that we live in a country that allows us to be involved, intimately involved with the government. And then it says to obey government authorities. Yes, it does say that. but never at the expense of God, right? In fact, you see that phrase in the New Testament and in the letters of Paul of Jesus as Lord. That was a direct affront at the government because it was proclaimed Caesar is Lord. And so they started saying Jesus is Lord. They were overtly going against the government of the day, and they were not obeying them, right, in that sense. So obviously, it wasn't saying you just blanketly obey. But also that Romans chapter 13 talks about how governments are designed to protect and to do good for people, to bring about good. That's their role, right? Well, if they are not doing that, and especially if you're a government of we the people, shouldn't we, of course, be involved to try to change that? And obviously, I think the answer is yes. But then on top of that, we have to always remember that our system of government was founded on biblical principles and understandings. And so if we are not inputting that into the government, we're going to lose it, which I think is why we're in this place. Why are we in this place where it's so frustrating and we get so upset because there's really very limited quality candidates and all of this stuff, right? It's like where are the strong Christians that live their faith? Where are they? Well, have we encouraged that at all? I start thinking about all of my experience in church, whether I've been a pastor or growing up. And I grew up in West Texas in a very patriotic church, conservative church. I don't know if I've ever heard a pastor or a church encourage the members to get involved and run for office, to get involved and serve in the political realm. Now, it wasn't discouraged overtly, but it was never really encouraged. And I started thinking about that. You know, we kind of, as churches, we kind of created this false understanding of separation of church and state, right? Because we didn't want the government imposing on us, which obviously that's very important. We didn't want that. So we were convinced that the only alternative is, well, we're not going to impose on that. So it's like, okay, government, you have your little area, and we'll have our little area, and never the two shall meet, right? And that's kind of, it feels like that's the philosophy, unfortunately, that our churches have had, either overtly or, well, you know what, we're just not going to talk about this. Well, if we failed to encourage Christian people to go and to get involved in their government, should it be a shock that there's maybe not as many Christian people and especially whenever the political scene becomes its own entity in itself, right? And which it obviously never was supposed to be that way, but now that it's become that, the church has messed up. And so now we're at a place where, man, it's so frustrating, let's just throw our hands up. That's where a lot of people are. But I needed a little bit of encouragement. So I do that by looking back at quotes from founders, and these are all quotes from presidents. And this is both an encouragement and also a kind of a slap in the face of reality that we're in a tough spot because we have forgotten this. But we need to, as Christians, we need to remember and we need to hold on and not waver on the fact that our country was founded on biblical principles, and they are necessary to be reinstilled if we are going to move forward. And that's not a new talking point or anything like that. That's not a political statement. That is just a statement of fact. That is how we were viewed by most of our leaders up until just really probably the last couple decades that we've really been moving overtly away from that. And so I was looking at some quotes of presidents, and these are pretty interesting. And I've used quotes talking about Scripture and things like that before, but these are all from different presidents. Thomas Jefferson, the studious perusal, so you can tell this was written a couple hundred years ago, perusal of the sacred volume will make better citizens. Now, they say that Thomas Jefferson was one of the least Christian, if you will, of the founding fathers. Now, that's kind of debatable. He did have a different view on things, but he knew the Bible very well, and he instilled those principles, obviously, in our founding documents. He recognized that without that, you're going to have major problems, right? And he said, this is how you get better citizens. Well, I think anyone, if they just honestly looked at the state of our country and you see what's going on, like there was a story, the mayor of Casper, Wyoming was recently interviewed, and they had like 200 homeless people that have just taken over and destroyed an old motel and has just used the streets as restroom. Well, we've always had homeless people, but it hasn't always been to this level. Something's happening to our citizenry, right? What is happening? Things are changing. You see, I think it's Dick's Sporting Goods gave their earnings report, and it was way down, and they talked about the percentage that they've lost due to theft is incredible, right? I mean, we're seeing a change in our citizenry in so many places, and it's because we're not paying attention to what is right, and especially from a biblical perspective, not just everybody knows what is good. No, they don't, right? For some people, it is a moral good to just go in and take what you need. Well, that goes against one of those pesky little 10 commandments, right? But if you're not focused on that, if that's not important to your society, you can see how you're led astray very quickly. All right, President Franklin Roosevelt, we cannot read the history of our rise and development as a nation without reckoning with the place the Bible has occupied in shaping the advances of the Republic. Now, Franklin Roosevelt was not one of those evil conservatives, right? I know that's how we decide to look at everything right now, right? You're either an evil conservative or you're an evil liberal. But he was a pretty progressive guy, right? But he recognized the importance of the Bible and that of any of the advances of the Republic. And I actually appreciate that he used the word republic, not democracy. That's shocking. It shows you that this was about 70 years ago, right? Or closer to 80. Man, we're getting a long way away from it. All right? Of course, everyone's favorite president, Zachary Taylor. The Bible is the best of books, and I wish it were in the hands of everyone. It is indispensable to the safety and performance of our institutions. I would that all our people were brought up under the influence of that holy book. I thought that was really interesting that it says indispensable to the safety and permanence of our institutions. What has been captured so much? Well, one, we've created too many institutions, more institutions than was designed, but now those institutions are the things that are starting to crumble around us, that we're losing faith in. And the reason is that they have lost their foundational principles, right? Zachary Taylor said if you want permanence in those institutions, the Bible and the principles of the Bible are necessary. All right, President Harry Truman. The fundamental basis of this nation's law was given to Moses on the Mount. The fundamental basis of our Bill of Rights comes from the teachings which we get from Exodus and St. Matthew, from Isaiah and St. Paul. I don't think we emphasize that enough these days. That would have been in the mid-1940s. But I mean, that's incredible, right? That a president would be basically saying, yes, like all of our laws and everything flow from what was given to Moses on the mount and what we see in the epistles and the gospel message. It forms who we are as a nation. And he recognized, and we're not telling people that enough. Right? And if that started all the way back then, look where we are now. Theodore Roosevelt, the other Roosevelt, the teachings of the Bible are so interwoven and entwined with our whole civic and social life that it would literally, I do not mean figuratively, I mean literally, impossible for us to figure to ourselves what that life would be if these teachings were removed. Well, if he could have gotten in a time machine, he actually could have started to see what that looks like. We would lose almost all the standards by which we now judge both public and private morals. All the standards towards which we, with more or less resolution, strive to raise ourselves. Almost every man who has by his life work added to the sum of human achievement of which the human race is proud, of which our people are proud, almost every such man has based his life work largely upon the teaching of the Bible. Right? I mean, it's an incredible acknowledgement and an incredible statement. Right? And that statement today would be deemed offensive. It's like, wait, are you saying people that don't believe the Bible can't have a positive life work? And that's not what he's saying. But what he's saying is most of those who have achieved things that are worthy have done it because they have a biblical founding, a biblical morality principles somewhere along the way. Now going back to John Adams, suppose a nation in some distant region. I like this one because one of the things that progressivism tries to do is to create a utopia, right? Hey, we can create the perfect society. Just let us, right? Just do what we say, and we'll create the perfect society. John Adams, suppose a nation in some distant region should take the Bible for their only law book, and every member should regulate his conduct by the precepts there exhibited. Every member would be obliged in conscience to temperance and frugality and industry, which is talking about hard work, to justice and kindness and charity towards his fellow men, and to piety, love, and reverence toward Almighty God. In this commonwealth, no man would steal or lie or in any way defraud his neighbor, but would live in peace and goodwill with all men. What a utopia, what a paradise would this region be? Now, he's not saying this is what we should do, but he's just emphasizing the beauty of this wonderful book that has been given to us, that if we would just follow it, the problems that we see in society wouldn't be there, right? If everyone followed it. Now, the founders knew that everyone would not follow it, which is why they set up the system like they did. But it just shows their reverence for the Scripture. And then the last one, President Ronald Reagan. Of the many influences that have shaped the United States of America into a distinctive nation and people, none may be said to be more fundamental and enduring than the Bible. The Bible and its teachings helped form the basis for the Founding Fathers' abiding belief in the inalienable rights of the individual, rights which they found implicit in the Bible's teaching of the inherent worth and dignity of each individual. You know, as I read those and hear those words, it gives me encouragement, because at least we know where we came from, right? Which means we could get back there. It's going to take work. And so don't get so exasperated that you just throw your hands up. Now, we do have to acknowledge how far off base we are, and we are way off base. And I've had conversations with Christians that say, you know, I just can't bring myself morally to vote for someone of certain character, or look, that person is not a Christian the way that I view a Christian, and all of those things are taken into account. But I also think it's important that we understand God works through flawed people all the time, because God works through people. We're all flawed. But God has worked through flawed political leaders as well. Right? Now, this isn't a justification. This is just a reality. So don't give up on the process because, we don't have a quality enough candidate. Right? Think about God sent Samuel to anoint Saul to be the first king I nearly said first king of England, first king of Israel, right? And who was Saul? He started off well. By the time that he finished, he was consulting mediums, right? Then God told Samuel to go and anoint King David. And later it's called that King David was a man after God's own heart. David was an extremely flawed individual, not only in his personal life, but in his political life as well. But God still used them to do amazing things and to actually bring that country forward. And I believe that God will continue to use flawed people, even in the political realm. And so we need to be active in that. We also need to be encouraging other Christians and encouraging churches. We need to start encouraging people that have biblical worldviews to start running for office, to get involved in the process. We've pretended that we could just keep these things separate. No, we can't. Just like Truman said, I'm afraid people are starting to forget how important the Bible was to this whole thing. Well, he was right. And now we're 80 years further down, and so now we've got to start rebuilding. But don't get discouraged. Learn how to take breaks. Sometimes you just have to step away and unplug. That's okay. That's healthy. But make sure that you are still getting engaged and trying to help others that are just throwing in the towel. Say, no, we need to keep standing up for biblical principles to be used in our government until it's too late. And we're not the ones to say it's too late. It's too late whenever God decides to do something drastic. And maybe that's coming. But until then, we have a responsibility as Christians to be informed and to be involved in our system of government. Not only because I believe that's what God desires for us, but if you care about people, you desire to have a government that moves closer to biblical principles, because that's going to be what is best for the largest number of people than trying to think that we can create our own utopia from progressive and man-made ideologies, not biblical principles. All right, thank y'all for coming. We'll be back on the third Tuesday of this month. Thanks for joining us.